Welcome to the 2020 Global Peace Film Festival interviews. My name is Kelly Devine. I'm the Artistic Director. Please join me and Nina Strike, the Executive Director, welcoming Julie Wilder, who will be interviewing three wonderful filmmakers who are participating in the festival this year. Georgia Weiss with Mantra, Sounds into Silence, Tamara Solomon, The Great Disconnect, and Julie Bayer-Salzman with Surfing Corona. You can see all of these films by going to the Global Peace Film Festival website, peacefilmfest.org. The festival starts September 21st and runs through October the 4th. Tickets are on sale currently. You can check out all of these films by viewing the Watch tab, as well as looking at all the rest of the events we have on our Events tab. And now, let's start the interview.
Thank you so much, Kelly. I'm glad to be here. I've watched all of these films and they are absolutely perfect for this moment in time. I'm really excited to interview the filmmakers and hear a little bit more about their craft and what went into the making of these films. So let's just jump right into it. I would love to start with Georgia Weiss, who's coming to us from Barcelona, Spain, and her movie and film is called Mantra. It is about Kirtan, which I have participated in several. I was like, oh, I've seen that one and that one and that one. So I'm really excited to have seen this film and to introduce a wider audience to it. So Georgia, welcome to the Global Peace Film Festival, and tell us about your film. And keeping in mind, of course, no one's seen it yet, so you don't want to give spoilers, but we want to get some of the background of it.
Yeah, the film, it's a music documentary, a 1.5-hour music documentary, and it's for anyone who's interested in music, meditation, mantras. It's also a film that's describing what Kirtan is. Kirtan is a traditional form of singing from India, where people gather together and they sing devotional mantras. And what they do is the main singer sings a verse or one mantra and the others sing back. And this, what this does is, and through the repetition of the mantras, you can very easily fall into a state of meditation. But more so, and what we also discovered in the filming is that people can also, when you're connecting with yourself, your inner self, when you're in that meditative state, you're also connecting with everybody else and everything that's around you. So that's what the film is about. We also feature, we tell the stories of the main Kirtan mantra singers in the West, who actually also brought this music movement into the West, which has been growing quite strongly together with the yoga movement in the West, because lots of yoga teachers play these mantras in their yoga schools, and people who discover the music, they get to know the artists. Suddenly the artists are traveling around the world, singing mantras with thousands of people all over the place in Russia, in China. It's pretty amazing phenomena that's going on with this. And so this is a film just documenting the lives of these artists, how they got to know mantras, but more so also it's about normal people, everyday people who are participating in this and who've also made this their practice and why they've done it and how it's helping them. So it's basically a film who has anybody got curiosity about kirtan, mantras, meditation, and music. It's a good film, I think.
No, I agree. And as someone who's participated as an audience member in several kirtans in the past, I had no idea the international reach and the scope and how it has grown. So I learned a lot about it. I know right here in Orlando, there's been many kirtans that have happened with big audiences, and it's just kind of like this subculture that a lot of people don't know about. So I'm excited that you're able to introduce more people to it.
Yeah, I forgot to mention that it's Deva Prabha Meeta and Krishna Das, Natam Kaur, some of the names amongst many others who are participating in the film. That's just one thing.
Yeah, some kind of rock stars in the kirtan movement.
Yes.
Yeah. All right, let's go to Julie Bayer-Salzman in LA. This is definitely an international call here. She has a short film called Surfing Corona, which is incredibly timely and was, I believe, shot entirely during this pandemic. So Julie, welcome to Global Peace Film Festival.
Thank you. It's nice to be here. I really appreciate it. Yeah, you know, Surfing Corona, basically what happened was, I think, you know, March 13th, the lockdown began here in the United States. And I would say that within just like the first couple weeks, my initial impulse was to make something that could help people. I mean, I've been doing like sort of mindfulness, experiential mindfulness films for the last few years for kids. And I wanted to do something for adults this time because I knew that it was going to be a very challenging experience for so many people. And I mean, for me personally, I've always had a, well, not always, but for the last 6-7 years specifically, I've really been deep into like mindfulness meditation. My practice started probably 20 years ago, but I really got serious about it about 6 or 7 years ago. And I knew how it helped me get through incredibly difficult times. So I sort of felt like, all right, how can I convey this idea of, you know, of how we can get through these like waves of grief, of anxiety, of depression, and all these things that like were hitting so many of us. And at the time, I was doing a mindfulness meditation with John Kabat-Zinn on a fairly regular basis, and he has this famous quote of, you know, you can't fight the waves, but you can learn to surf. And it was just, I decided in that moment, like, okay, I need to do something with this analogy of surfing. And I was so limited with what I could shoot because, of course, everybody was in a lockdown. So I was, you know, I'd never done Zoom interviews, and you know, I was normally in somebody who like pays incredible detail to like the aesthetic, the visual side of filmmaking. I mean, it's a visual art form, and I usually am so carefully, I'm so careful about crafting imagery, and I was a little bit nervous about letting go to all that. So I should tell you about the film first, I suppose. Surfing Corona is essentially a 10-minute short film that I kind of refer to it as a love letter to humanity as we are in this period of the coronavirus, you know, pandemic. And I wanted to, in the film, I interviewed different like neuroscientists and trauma-informed yogis and educators and psychologists and just everyday people to find out like, okay, what are you doing to help yourself through this time? Like, how can we take what's happening and transform it into something that's actually healing or productive or I won't even say hopeful, but kind of, you know, a little bit hopeful. But how can we find our way into the center of the storm, into the eye of the storm? Like, how can we go through this experience and like find our center, find our equanimity, find our balance in all of it, because it's incredibly discombobulating on so many levels for everybody. So I interviewed all these folks. The one thing that I could actually film was surfers, which was great because the beaches were still open at that point. But we literally we sort of snuck in right before the beaches got closed down, and we were able to film some surf footage to intercut with the film so that surfing becomes a, you know, metaphor for how we get through these waves of emotional flux. And yeah, I mean, it was just sort of my need to sort of make a contribution in that moment. And everybody felt, I think, so disempowered and helpless and hopeless. And it was my way of sort of transforming all of that into something that was going to feel more positive. And I don't even want to say positive because it's not like I was trying to hush all of the negativity and the fear, but it was more of just a way of like, okay, I don't want to feed into all the fears and feed into all the anxieties. I want to help people find their balance in all of it. So that's what Surfing Corona that's what it is. It's a way of finding our balance again.
Yeah, I believe that this is one of the first films that was made during the pandemic that is in a film festival too.
Never thought about that.
Yeah, I think I was talking with the director, and she said that she hasn't checked every nook and cranny, but I think that it's at least one of the first, if not the first, And so if you can, you know, I just kind of want to ask you about like, you know, that change in filmmaking, like this is kind of going to shift and jiggle things, right?
Yes, yeah. You know, it's funny because, you know, again, it's like, as we all have had to give up our control over life, I had to give up my control as a filmmaker and just say, you know what, this is what we have to work with, and it's more important to do something than to, you know, not do it because you can't have it the way you want it, right? Like I just, you know, it was one of those, I just had to swallow.
It's almost like the film itself is a metaphor for what we have to do to surf.
Exactly. I mean, you know, the conditions are what they are, and we can't change these things. And the only thing we can change is how we're going to respond to all of the stuff that's happening. And that's really all we have control over at this moment. And really, let's face it, I mean, all the time. But I think we've been living under this illusion that we have all this control over our lives when, you know, I think this has proved to us that we really don't. And the only thing we truly do have control over is how we respond to events. And so yeah, it was a good practice. It was really good practice for me. I mean, I was supposed to be in Portland this year doing a film in the school system up there. And now of course that can't happen. So we're looking into ways of doing a similar film, but just via Zoom and interviews and giving kids their own, just basically letting them film. And I essentially then just become the editor of all the footage as opposed to the director of trying to get, you know, film exactly what I want and find a different way of telling the story.
That's incredible.
We're all going to have to find new ways of telling our stories.
I can't wait.
And new stories to tell.
Yeah, the next year or two, and I'm sure that maybe the next Global Peace Film Festival will have stories and movies being made in this time. So it'll be very interesting to see. Okay, let's go next to Tamer Solomon. He's in Ottawa, Canada. He has a film called The Great Disconnect. Welcome to the Global Peace Film Festival, Tamer.
Thank you, Julie. It's such a pleasure to be here, really. Thank you.
Yeah, and so same question for you. Tell us about your film. Give us the lay of the land.
Sounds good. Yeah, the Great Disconnect is really just about how we live in a seemingly connected world, you know, via social media and technology, but yet people are feeling disconnected and lonely to some degree. And the film really just stems from my curiosity of a Rastafarian community. So when audiences film, they'll see just a glimpse of me going up into the mountains of Jamaica, largely because I could kind of get up there. I had a friend who was a Rastafarian who could take me into these remote places in Jamaica. So at the beginning of our scripting and our production, we had this vision of going up and interviewing this culture that's not quite well understood in the mountains of Jamaica. And so when I was up there, we wanted to kind of film their whole lifestyle and what they're all about. But then things took a turn when I was up there, in a sense where all the stuff that I was seeing was really interesting, but the sense of community that these Rastafarians had and the love they had towards each other really captivated me. And I was interested in that largely because my background is sort of in nutrition and in wellness. And whenever you read longevity books, there's always this discussion around the idea of, you know, eating well and exercising having an effect on how long you live. But there's always tucked away in many of these chapters is that the more socially connected and the more involved in your community, the longer you live. And so I just had that as background knowledge. And for whatever reason, that just kept itching at me as a topic to explore, because I just don't feel like it's really talked about. You know, the importance of our sense of community. How connected are we to people? What are our friendships like? Are we getting away from them? So anyways, we went back to the script after this trip in Jamaica, thinking, oh geez, what are we going to tell our executive producers and the scripting team? Because I really just felt like we had to move away from the topic. And so we sat down and we really looked at it and said, you know what, this could be something really interesting to explore. And so the film basically just gets into the explanations as to why we have community breakdown. And you can guess that, you know, technology is one thing. As great as this is, you know, it's a far second best than if we were all together in a room having tea and coffee and feeling each other and you know, in a room. And so physically in a physical environment. And so So that's one aspect of it, and you can imagine what that might entail. And then, of course, it's just the way the fast-paced world that we live in. So we are able to interview many urban planners and city planners. So that was one of the interesting parts of the film for us as interviewees, was that just how a city is designed has an effect on how you interact with people. So you know, the idea of like an urban jungle is kind of quite accurate, because we're sort of in this environment that evolutionarily isn't really something that we're like overly comfortable with. And so when we're around all these big buildings and stuff, as cool as they look, they don't really allow us to connect in a human fashion that we have historically. And so that was a really interesting part of the film. So I hope people really enjoy that aspect when we come to it. And then, of course, the other piece is that we just you know, we work too much. We you know, we are valuing the material world more than the spiritual world, as many people I think will see in Mantra, which is an awesome film to see. But The Great Disconnect just sort of covers those three pieces as causing community breakdown. And then, of course, we try to get into the solutions of what we need to do as humans. And for the most part, it's quite intuitive. And two of the pieces of the film that we really explore in trying to tell people is that, you know, you want to be socially connected, but you also want to you know, and get involved in your community and try to make the world a better place. And we just use several analogies. We have a great interview in the film that maybe some people might know, is a gentleman named Ron Finley, and you can look him up. He's got like 3 million views of a TED Talk, literally about just, you know, using the idea of community gardens and getting people together and interacting with each other. And then throughout the film, there's a woman named Kirtan who audiences will meet, who I end up meeting for the first time, literally on camera. We're able to capture it. And she is volunteering to invite her neighbors in a condo that she doesn't know, because she feels like she wants to have a sense of community. And so we don't know what happens. We put out all these invitations out, and we just try to see whether people end up showing up. Are people willing to connect or not? And so that's what, in a nutshell, what The Great Disconnect is about.
Yeah, and I love how you also wove, you know, social media and scrolling and how we prioritize our time, and kind of like that opportunity cost that's lost when we engage in this over that. And also, it wasn't without my attention that we're in the middle of a pandemic, and a lot of the things, you know, inviting neighbors over for dinner on a rooftop is, you know, something that is not really we're able to do right now. So I would love for you to speak to what, you know, that aspect of things.
Yeah, no, that's great, because this is great, right? Like, you know, this is awesome, you know, to be able to connect through Zoom and to be able to connect through FaceTime. And many of us weren't able to, you know, see our families during this time. Perhaps if you're not, you know, in proximity. I don't live close to my family, so I haven't, you know, been able to see them for quite some time. And obviously these are, it's great to be able to do that. But like I said, it's a far second best. It's not naturally the way that we have naturally communicated. And so I always say to people, hopefully we can get back to that place where we can connect in physical reality, you know, more often, and in you know, without all these restrictions around us. And one of the best resources, I think, and again, a woman by the name of Sherry Turkell shows up in the film. We utilized her TED Talk as a way to get her expertise. And what's really important for people to understand is that, you know, we have to create a balance between technology and real life. And so these are fantastic tools, and it's been a great tool for us to try to really get through this, you know, but they are a far second best than getting together. And hopefully that day comes again where it can just be really natural to get together, because I do think it's going to have a huge effect. And I think that we are really surfing this pandemic. And I think ultimately, though, we have to get back to a place at some point where we can come physically together, because it does so much to our well-being that experts are just beginning to really understand. And so.
And I think that your film is going to be a really important foundational piece for people moving forward, because maybe they didn't realize how important, and they took for granted how important community is, and those, you know, little interactions that you have throughout the day And this, pandemic pause, as I like to call it, is, going to be, hopefully people will just dive right into the whole community piece in a whole new way, and as a kind of revival on the other side of this.
Totally. That's so well said.
Yeah. All right. So let's dive a little bit deeper. I'm going to go back to Georgia, and just I would love to know what your introduction to Kirtan was and how you got involved in that subject and decided to make this a story that you wanted to share. Georgia, I think you have to unmute.
Thank you. No, I discovered the music of mantra in yoga classes actually a long time ago, but it was actually when I had a very close friend who got diagnosed with cancer, and I was kind of by her side the last 5 years of her life, trying to be strong for her, trying to help coach her. She was young, of course. It was a very difficult situation, and so I was reading a lot of books or ways of how to handle this. But then I also, around the same time, I got discovered this music of Deva Prema Miten and another Lama Gyome, he's also in the film. He's a Tibetan monk who sings mantras, and I heard this music, and it was really the only thing that actually really coached me through this phase with it not being as terrible or as bad. And I felt it gave me strength that I was a better supporter for her in this whole process of having to let go and having to die, basically. For me to come to terms with it as well, because the music made me feel like there's not so much barriers between life and death. And it just put me straight into that feeling. And that's what helped me so much. So after I made that very profound experience with this music, I'm the film editor. I've been working as editing films for over 25 years. I worked a lot of music documentaries. I used to live in New York and was editing music documentaries there. So you can imagine I was continuing working as an editor on other projects, but I'd always be listening to mantra music while I'd be selecting the footage of the other films, and the desire just grew stronger and stronger and stronger that I'd like to actually make a film about this music, because it gave so much to me, and I felt like it really could give so much to others, because with the kind of aim to maybe demystify it, because, you know, mantras are, oh, that's the sect, or that's spiritual, or it's not for me. So I thought, no, we need to have a film about this movement and about this music. It's very important. And so the desire kept stronger and stronger. And at some point I dared take the step from being in the edit room to going out and producing and directing. And with the help of a tremendous team behind me, my co-director and principal cameraman, Variom, who's a yoga photographer, and everybody kind of wanted this film to happen. And yeah, it took a long time, but you know, I don't know exactly how many years, 6 years and maybe 2 years distributing, something like that, more. But yeah.
So it's been in the works for a while. It's been in the works for a while. And so I have to touch on the fact that, you know, this is a very communal experience, this form of mantra and meditation. It's active engagement and participation. And of course, this is one of the, you know, we've all seen the headlines about the chorus that, you know, spread, you know, was a super spreader event. And so I'm sure that this has impacted the Kirtan community. You know, do you know of any ways that they've adapted to do Kirtan remotely, or, you know, like how has this impacted, the pandemic impacted the community?
Yeah, no, they all are doing regular kirtans online every week, every month. They all have programs. Just if you go to their Facebook pages, you'll find it. It's definitely there. And it is beautiful. You see how many people are watching. They're the messages and everything. But of course, you don't really hear other people singing. But still, you know, it's just nice to hear them, to be with them, to sing with them, to listen to their insights. It has been beautiful, and it was very important, especially here in Barcelona. We have a lot of kirtan singers, and there's a lot of kirtan going on here. And it was suddenly like now we all felt like, oh, we don't have that connection anymore. And then they started doing online, and yeah. But still, I'm very much looking forward to when we can actually hear each other again and be together again. Yeah.
Right. Okay. Well, thank you so much for sharing that and your story about, that liminal space and that lifeline for you. And that really comes through in the people that you interview who are in the audience. You can tell that it's just almost like this magical thing that it's a balm to the soul. So you really captured that really beautifully.
Thank you.
Yeah. All right. Let's go back to Julie in LA with Surfing Corona. I could ask you the question, what attracted you to this issue and subject, but I think you kind of covered that in your first question. But I'd like to know, maybe a little bit more in talking with these people that you interviewed, because it really is a series of interviews with people really getting their golden nuggets of wisdom that they're kind of self-realizing in real time. So I'd like to hear a little bit more about, that process of working with different individuals and what have they seen the film? How do they feel about it, seeing it all pulled together? I'd love to hear more about that.
Yeah. Well, I knew all those people, right? So it was the casting part was kind of easy because I just sort of turned to the community people I know and said, oh, here's what I want to do. And people jumped on board, and knowing those people and knowing their backgrounds and what they do, even though the questions I had for them were the same for basically all of them, and every interview it turns into more conversation versus just like questions and answers. So as I was interviewing everybody and kind of getting to the core of their own lives and their own work and how it relates to what's going on, and sort of like once I was kind of like mining for the nuggets there. I simultaneously was sort of envisioning a broader scope of a project, and so they've all seen the film to answer that question, yeah, and they were, everybody's like very excited to be a part of that and feeling like that they can offer some tools to the people who are watching the film. But the broader scope was then, I basically took each of those interviews and then cut their own little mini segments out of them, and I've just sort of been uploading those onto IGTV, and letting them each focus on a theme. So it was a fun experience because it was all sort of happening as it was happening, and there was not a lot of pre-planning. It was very much in the moment, kind of as far as the not only the interviews went, but then also just like the evolution of the project, and then the evolution of like what turned into basically a series. And I think right now there are maybe 10 or 11 mini segments, that focus on each person. And yeah, I mean, I think it just helps to kind of really know the people you're interviewing, right? And be familiar with the work, and to sort of, throughout the interview process, really see kind of what are the themes that emerge, and how do those themes relate to what we're going through. And, because got a neuroscientist and a yogi and a therapist and, educators, I was always interested in like how the coronavirus is affecting all of them individually, but also with their work. And especially with education, I think that's a big area that I think I'm personally invested in, and then I think that is just so it's having such a huge impact on education and sort of the future of education. So I could sort of take each person, knowing what they were good at or what they specialize in, and just have create the conversation that way, pull the nugget out. I mean, I feel like in the film itself, what the people have to say are really more universally themed and like universally based ideas. I mean, it's personal and universal at the same time, whereas when I break it down into the segments, it's much more specific towards that person's area of expertise. So it's yeah, it was just like it was just all kind of, like I said, like it was all evolving in the moment, and there was not a lot of planning. There was no planning.
It's an organic unfolding, if you will.
Yes. Yeah.
All right, well, let's go back to Tamer in Ottawa for kind of the same question. I mean, it's interesting because you were originally doing one thing and then you pivoted into this different direction. And so I'm curious about your process with that, because you were doing one thing and then you did another thing. Like, had you had a consciousness around community before this? Like, was that a topic of interest for you? Or was this just totally out of left field and just completely inspired you in a way that you had never thought about it before, like your personal journey with that? And then why it was so important for you to pivot in the middle of that film?
For sure. No, that's one of there's this book I read a long time ago, and it was called The Five Essentials of Well-Being. And basically, the five essentials of well-being being, I think, one's career well-being, physical well-being, community well-being, which I'll get into, and there's two more that are kind of related, like social well-being, just like our friendships and whatnot. But anyways, in that book, the author concludes by just saying that, out of the five essential well-being, if you had, physical, career, social, and financial well-being, you would have a good life. You'd have a lot of things in place. But if you had community well-being, then you would have a great life. And so I've always remembered that quote at the end of this book. And when I was, again, up in the mountains of Jamaica, observing these Rastafarians, it kind of just itched at me. And I remember writing it in my journal when we were up there. And then when we went back down to the script, I just, as the producer director, I was just kind of constantly just letting everybody know, like, this is it. This is the topic. We just really have to go after this. And then really it was just reaching out to these interviewees. I had read a book called Happy City, and I really wanted to interview this journalist who talked a lot about sort of what makes people in a city happy. And so I reached out to him. I reached out to, other people who were sort of in the space of community well-being. So in the film, what I think caused us to pivot was sort of these preliminary interviews that I was just having on the phone with, a guy who's renowned as the economist of happiness. So this guy studies the financial aspects of what makes people happy. And so he had a sort of take on what makes people happy, how to create community from an economical standpoint. And then there was this other gentleman who's just doing tons of work here in Canada. He just received what we call like one of the highest awards as a Canadian, which is the I forget what it's called, but anyways, it's a big honor in Canada. And he's basically done a ton of work to reduce poverty, right? And so, we don't really, these aren't things I understand reducing poverty was really important, but he just really brought it to the surface. And he has this whole thing on his organization and what they do for community. And one thing led to another. I actually didn't even really have all my interviewees lined up. Every time I had an interview, I would ask them, is there anybody else that you would recommend? And everybody was sort of recommending somebody to interview. And that's sort of how I pieced together all the interviewees that people see in the film. So ultimately, the pivot kind of happened, just sort of from my own curiosity. And then we sort of just let the interviews lead us into the topic of community, basically.
Unmute.
Julie, I think you're on mute, but this might be a good moment to just do one little quick round with everyone to ask what you guys are working on next and how our audiences can support you. So we'll start with Georgia.
Okay, thank you. Well, I'm actually still very busy in bringing out Mantra. We've been in many countries also around the world, but there's a lot of work involved. We're a very small crew with little resources. So spreading the word about the film is actually the best help that we can receive. We're developing together with my cameraman and co-director, we'd like to make a film about conscious dying. It's already been footage filmed, and I'd love to have the time to concentrate and to develop this film eventually. But first, I feel like Mantra needs to be wrapped properly. So at this point, energy into this film, spreading the word is the best help that we can get. And hopefully we can make another film soon.
Thank you. Julie?
Well, there are so many different projects right now that I feel like I would do if I could. Like I was saying earlier, we were supposed to be in Portland this year to do a documentary about the nation's first 4-credit semester-long class in mindfulness, and that's being offered to public high school kids in Portland, Oregon. So we're still trying to figure out how to do that remotely. And meanwhile, you know, while I'm kind of trying to sort that out, I've been doing a series of short films on mindfulness and education. Just Breathe was the first one of that, and then I did two more, one on anxiety in middle school, and then a third one on depression in high school. So I'm trying to basically, like, you know, go up the stages of life, and the next one I plan to do is on trauma in college and how a mindfulness practice can help people who've been through trauma. And then would go on to addiction in midlife, and then grief in elder years. So I want to continue the series of short experiential films on mindfulness and education, and then try to get this feature film off the ground regarding the nation's first 4-credit class in public high schools.
Oh, wonderful. And I also, at this moment, wanted to remind our audiences, for anyone who had seen Just Breathe at the Global Peace Film Festival years ago, this they will really enjoy Surfing Corona and follow on everything that you do. Tamara, what are you up to? What's next?
I'm sort of on a similar path of just promoting The Great Disconnect. And for people who were interested in the film, so prior to even getting into submitting the film into film festivals, we had a lot of interest from, you know, cities and city municipalities. If you're a non-for-profit organization, the film was licensed by multiple organizations of that nature to screen the film in front of people who are working in this space, and for, you know, just trying to inspire their communities to sort of get involved into their community. So if anybody is in that space, please reach out at www.disconnecteddoc.com. I think you guys are going to throw that in the place. And then, yeah, we're just on a film festival circuit. This is, you know, Global Peace is just an awesome place to have a film. So thank you, and just follow us, and we'll be announcing all the other festivals that we're a part of. But definitely check out Global Peace first.
Oh, thank you so much. And Julie Wilder, thank you so much for conducting this interview for us. We've been honored by having you with us.
It was my pleasure. It's not every day you get to meet people who are talking about and filming about the subjects you love passionately. So.
Oh, that's wonderful. So thank everyone out there for watching. And again, you can learn more about each of the filmmakers. Georgia Visa's film, mantramovie.com, Tamara Solomon's film, The Great Disconnect by disconnecteddoc.com or .org, and Wave Crest Films for Julie Bear Salzman and her series of films on mindfulness. Please remember to go to peacefilmfest.org to check out all of the events. The festival starts September 21st and runs through October 4th. Surfing Corona is a short and will be available for the entire length of the festival. This is September 21st through October the 4th on our short film tab. Mantra, though, is only available for a short period of time near the beginning of the festival. So please go to our watch tab, look at the film pages, and get your ticket right away for that. The Great Disconnect is also available. Tickets are on sale right now. So again, if there is any question you didn't ask these filmmakers that you are itching to ask each of them, when you go to our film pages, you will find a Google form called Submit a Filmmaker Question. It's very simple. Your question, your name, your email, and the film title. And we will get those questions to the filmmakers so that you can be connected and get your answers. So thanks again. We'll see you at the festival.